it's interesting to see how people talk about the trans community from a sports perspective, because I'm just like, but all we want to do is play.
Yes.
Like,
yeah.
we just want to be a part of it. Yeah, so I am a youth program coordinator for a LGBTQ plus resource center. I'm also a really big hockey fan. I'm trans and disabled, so finding, events and programming that are inclusive and accessible to me is super challenging. But with You Can Play, it's been really great to see people actually, supporting and being inclusive of the community. So, oh yeah, my pronouns. I use they, them pronouns. I'm completely blanking because I just had my coffee.
You're doing great.
Laura, I'm in my 50s. I'm a middle school English and social studies teacher. I'm bi and disabled, and I didn't come to hockey until my 40s. In fact, I was completely, almost on purpose, oblivious to most sports until then. And my father is very, very amused that he now has a kid later in life who suddenly found a sport they actually were excited about.
So from there, I guess my next question is, how did you both get into hockey?
I've always been a hockey fan, like growing up. I had a lot of like older brother figures in my life from the school that my dad taught at who were really into hockey. So I thoroughly enjoyed hockey from a young age, but I wasn't ever able to go to games when I was younger. So I watched a lot on TV and I read a lot of stats. But I wasn't able to like fully like embrace the feeling of being like a fan, because I didn't feel like I was, a part of the message that they were like sending out. And then I went to my first game, and that was what, 2013, I want to say.
We're like 15.
2015? Yeah. My first game, which was super exciting. And I was like, wow, this is what it feels like to be like an actual like fan, just like sit in the stands and, actually participate with people around me who like the same sport. So that was very exciting for me. It was very overwhelming, I'm gonna be honest. Being in I'd been in stadiums like that before, but they were always like very sensory overload.
Mm-hmm.
Thankfully, our SAP arena has this thing called a sensory kit, which I was not aware of, and they were like, "Yeah, we'll just give you this kit, and you can, I don't know, function." And I was like, "What? This is magical."
They have noise canceling headphones and sunglasses and all kinds of stuff, and you can just basically leave your ID with them as a, it's free. You just leave something with them and then you bring it back at the end of the game. And
yeah, so not only was I able to like fully actually participate that day, but I was able to leave without a migraine or overload meltdown.
That's so thoughtful and inclusive.
Yeah,
that's really great.
Yeah, we kind of wish all arenas had those. I know there are a few of them that do, but we're waiting to hear about other ones.
Well, let me know if I can help push that in any way.
I will. That might be something we can nudge some other. That should be something pretty universal. I would hope eventually that all NHL teams would do that, because it's not just, it's for a lot of different kinds of things. I mean, I've used them more than I do, but it's definitely helpful. Let's see, when did I find hockey? I found hockey online. I actually was reading just because of the circles I hang out with online of people I talk to. I ended up reading a web comic called Check Please. And it is literally both a queer and hockey web comic. And now the author has published actual books of it. And I got into that and got curious, I guess, about actual hockey. And I had friends who kindly steered me in the direction of the Pittsburgh Penguins, which has resulted in any number of very confused friends. You live in shark territory. Why are you? Yeah, I have pictures of this one sitting next to me looking like, why am I sitting with you? So
you've won cups, so
yeah, there's that.
Sorry about it, Ren.
It's fine. I'm not salty. I'm just.
But so anyway, there was something about the Pens that I don't know. It was seeing the behind the scenes stuff, like almost as I was watching games for the first time, and so I got to know the team as it was at that point, and I kind of came in right when they were winning the back-to-back cups, so a little spoiled. And maybe that's why I don't get as sad that they don't win every year, you know?
Yeah.
But I also have gone and cheered for the Sharks because they're our local guys. And I have a little Sharks thing up in my classroom, you know, like this is Sharks territory because kids get a kick out of that. It just happened to have a Sidney Crosby card next to it.
Ha ha ha. You can like both.
Yeah.
You can like both.
We like to joke too. It's like I'm a big Sharks, but I support other teams, and I support a lot of like individual players as well. So we root for each other's teams a lot.
So I ended up asking, and it turned out my husband had actually seen some Sharks games when he was younger, and we thought, well, maybe we should try to go. And a friend of mine a colleague has also kindly given us extra tickets when he can't go. And so we've saved up for the Pens games when they come to town. So I've actually been to real games now for a few years, and not a lot. It's still very expensive, and I'm a public school teacher, but we've been to a couple of we've been to the one Hockey is for Everyone game where you brought a sign, and we've just the people who are at these games generally are really nice. Like if you're wearing the other team's jersey, there's chirping, but people are pretty nice about it, and they'll be like, I think my first game I wore a Marc-Andre Fleury jersey, and people were like, yeah, he's cool. You know, so it was just generally I found it to be a very welcoming kind of atmosphere.
That's awesome. That's really cool. What do you love about hockey?
Ooh.
Can you think about it for a second?
Yes, you go first.
Okay, I'll go first. The skill to me is amazing. I don't know, maybe it's just partly because I have very little sense of balance myself, but I just love watching the skill and the teamwork. I guess those are the things that got me, and the amount of communication that I see on the ice that's not always words. I'm a musician in my non-teaching time, and there's a lot of that same kind of, you know, keeping an eye on each other and just responding to each other. And I think that felt familiar, weirdly enough.
Interesting.
I like the excitement of being at a game and everyone getting kind of riled up and cheering, and I don't like the booing part. That's I'm a middle school teacher, so I get really huffy about people being rude, but I don't know, there's something about watching that teamwork and responding to it that I've really found enjoyable, and that was something I didn't have before in anything really.
I'm a big fan of the work that goes into making a team as stable as it is, from a background of like studying like sociology and like how people communicate with each other, and it's just fascinating to see. So I'm coming at this from a scientific standpoint. My grandpa would be so proud. It's fascinating to see as you said, the teamwork that goes into everything. Because when you look on the ice and you see, you know, rookies being protected by senior members of the team, or like just like unavoidable silent communication happening on the ice in those close-ups, you're just like, wow, this is amazing. Because like some of these players don't even have that with like their own families. Like it's on another level.
It's a deep bond, and you connect, and there's like unspoken cues.
Definitely.
And I think the work that it takes to get to that is interesting to me. And I've told students before when they're like, oh, so-and-so's a great athlete. And I'm like, well, you can have that skill, but it's that practice and practice and practice till it becomes the best players I see are the ones who really work on those things, you know.
Sidney
and
Crosby.
Oh yeah.
He's a
But
prime
I
example.
see a lot of younger players emulating that, and, you know, understanding that they can be as talented as you want, but you have to put in that work and that practice.
Yeah, because practice until it becomes second nature, because it's not there at the beginning, which is okay. If like if you're a rookie, you might not have it yet. That's fine. But like you see the more senior players and like their focus and dedication to teaching the younger players like what everything is about. It's fantastic.
That's awesome. I really like that. How could hockey be better for each of you, individually or collectively for queer folks, or both?
Definitely. I think from my perspective of being trans and non-binary, sports is a really hard topic to talk about, especially with gender and sports politics. There's like a lot of, you know, uproar about the trans community in sports, especially coming from a place where I am an adult now as opposed to youth. There's a lot more leeway in youth sports versus adult sports, and like minor versus major league. I find from a competitive nature, because I'm not a very competitive person, it's interesting to see how people talk about the trans community from a sports perspective, because I'm just like, but all we want to do is play.
Yes.
Like,
yeah.
we just want to be a part of it. Like, we just want to. It's I think it's about making sure that everyone knows that it's about, how do I say this? It's not about, I lost my train of thought.
You want me to go and then you think about it?
Yes.
Okay. Train of thought just jumped the track. It'll be back. I know one thing we talked about earlier before this started was the team, you know, we love seeing the teams make statements or use pride tape or have a pride night, and, you know, a hockey is for everyone night, and those are great. But it feels a lot sometimes like they're willing to do that and then it just stops. And, you know, they'll do that, but then they are still partnered, Pens, still partnered with Chick-fil-A for things.
Yeah, I scream about that daily on the internet. So.
You and I had a brief exchange on Twitter, in fact, about that one time. I was one of the people who was like, why are you? So it's like, I get it from a money standpoint, but I also feel like you can't, if you really want, as a team, if any team really wants fans to feel completely welcome, they have to be thinking about that. And it feels like that's not going to happen until they hire a bunch of queer people who are there to say, hey, you know, and I've seen it with people of color starting to be hired more. Not as prevalent as we'd like, but who are there to be part of the decision process, because then they will notice that stuff and be able to speak up. And as much as I see the pride tape, I still see teams partner with groups like that, or not making big statements if a player says something that's not really great, not saying anything, just ignoring it.
Yeah.
There's been a little bit of that with a lot of teams.
There's a difference between putting on a statement for the benefit of, you know, Pride Month, or the benefit of You Can Play, so that everyone knows that a team is inclusive, versus normalizing and including queer narratives in, you know, in your fans, and in, you know, allyship and team members, and normalizing those stories to be a part of the narrative, those decisions that get made about, you know, team sponsorships, and like, you know, working with certain local organizations that put in the work of making sure that, you know, the next generation of players is more inclusive and accessible to everyone. You know, coming from a program coordinator perspective of working with queer and trans youth, I really see a lot of local organizations making an effort to be more inclusive for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, sports has a long way to go.
Mm-hmm.
I think I come from the privilege of, you know, working in a really small community in California, which is far more progressive than some states and
Yes.
some cities. But at the same time,
there's still a lot, and we've talked about it a little bit, because I teach middle school, and we finally got the Sharks do an outreach to schools, and they provide like field hockey, you know, like the ball hockey equipment. And my colleague finally got that right before the pandemic, and the kids had a blast. But it was great. They'd run into my room for English class. They'd be like, so and so was in the box. I'm like, what are you doing getting in the box in seventh grade?
Awesome.
But okay. But they were having fun with it, and he and my colleague and I had talked about this, because we had kids who were interested in hockey who were under the impression it wasn't for them.
Yes.
And no one had ever brought that into the curriculum. We had, you know, and I teach in a majority Latina community, and it was always, you guys like basketball and you guys like football, and those are the team jerseys you'd see, right? And I actually had kids who were really upset and told me they were hockey fans, and they stopped watching, they stopped wanting to go to games because people would hassle them. You know, one kid literally, who was Afro-Latina, told me he gave up even watching hockey because he was harassed about it so much. That's not your thing, you know. And I could see kids getting steered towards certain sports because it was expected. And so to finally get hockey in our school in PE was awesome. I assume that's going to continue once we're back on site in August.
That's wonderful.
But I think it's that same kind of thing where people see, if they don't see it, they're not going to know it's for them.
Yeah.
If they don't see people, if they don't see actual representation, eventually they're going to give up. And it doesn't have to be the players, but I feel like even just a team saying, hey, you can be part of something. You know, I know that my first game, I felt very much like that. Like, oh, I wasn't under the impression that I was ever going to be a part of anything with sports. And so to feel like, hey, this is fun. And I remember showing up to the first game I went to live in person, and being very nervous. And I sat down, and this really wonderful woman who was the Bay Area youth counselor, this older Black woman, sat down next to me, and she's like, "You look a little nervous, honey." She was like sitting in our row or right in front of us. And I was like, I have absolutely no idea what I'm supposed to do. And she turned around, and we were wearing opposite jerseys, right? And she goes, "I'll explain it to you. No problem." And like, we just had this back and forth the entire game. And I was like, oh, and she would explain like the plays and
That's
why stuff
awesome.
was in the box, and
Which is super useful because my visual processing is awful, and I was just like, I don't know what's happening, but I love it.
And that's so great, and that's what this sport should be. So,
Right.
What keeps you both in hockey?
Goodness, I think a lot of steps are being taken to make hockey for everyone in this day and age, which is super great to see. I remember growing up, I probably wouldn't have stayed interested in hockey because I would have felt like it wasn't for me. And now as an adult, I get to see a whole new generation of kids that get to feel included in hockey and in sports in general. And I think for me, staying with my love for hockey is all about the community that like surrounds me, if that makes sense. Like the online community has been so prevalent in me staying in love with the sport. From people just being like, oh, we'll see you at the next game, to, oh, I'm so sorry that happened at that game. We'll make sure that it doesn't happen again by speaking up. We've had a couple times, I would say, online where people have had to, support us because, our identities were not welcome in a certain sports platform. I'm just like, but it's a part of who I am. I also happen to enjoy hockey. This is not what's on the table right now. I'm talking about hockey. So I feel like including my identity in that narrative and not being excluded because of it is why I stay. Because there's an entire community around me that's like, we support you.
I would say for me, the online thing, but that developed for me, I think, right when I was starting to wonder if it was something I could sustain. And then I ended up supporting and then becoming an ally member of the Black Girl Hockey Club group. And Renee sucked me right in. And
Renee is lovely. She's one of my favorite humans.
And then when we hit this pandemic shutdown and the group started putting on online events, and even those were very specifically, deliberately inclusive, and that community has been really supportive of the LGBTQ plus community, has been really supportive, very much of the intersectionality of identities, in the sense of dealing with the oppression of those identities and trying to make things open, very respectful of the disabled community, and and so being an ally to that group, but also being part of that group in another way. And now the book club, and so it's actually, while being shut in the house pretty much for 1.5 years to be safe, as an immunocompromised person, it was really hard. And that group was one of the reasons I got through it okay.
That's incredible.
Were those meetings and those people and the events. The book club's a lot of fun.
That's awesome.
But just the events and what that group does to try to bring awareness to the racism in hockey as well, and and makes it really clear that all of those things get connected. It's not isolated. It's a general sense of how people are accepted or not what needs to change. And so I feel like because that group is making a push forward and it's a constant movement and it's not just let's make a statement and sit, which is what teams tend to do. Organizations, big organizations tend to be like, and we're going to make a statement. And then I'm like,
gonna do something about it?
yeah, exactly. We're waiting for the thing that you're gonna do after you've said the thing. And
because a statement is words. Words mean nothing if you don't back it up with action.
Yeah.
I completely agree. I think that's you're spot on. What gives you hope for queer people in the sport?
The athletes who have two things, I think, for me. The athletes who, and I wish for more, but the ones who have come out, and it's the younger ones generally. I mean, we're in Sharks territory and they have a really inclusive youth program.
Yeah.
And
is that Teal for Change?
Yeah, a bunch of those different things. And the fact that their youth programs have made a point, like I was able to share a film with I work with the school's QSA and as a staff mentor, and I was able to show them a film that the Sharks put out about one of their young players who was trans, and the team was like, okay. They were they were dealing with stuff everywhere else, but on the ice and with their youth team, it was like, okay, this is you, we're fine. And I was able to show that, and the kids were just kind of taken aback, I think, by how welcoming and inclusive it was. And so seeing younger people, some of the younger athletes, I know that there are younger hockey players in the minors who are out. And knowing that it may not be as much as I'd love to see a major league player come out while they're still playing, it's less likely to happen than just seeing these younger players who are already out just continue right on up into the major leagues at some point if they're good enough. And that's kind of what I want to see. That gives me hope that, like, if they're already there, that they'll just bring that in, and maybe it won't be the big deal. It'll be just like, everybody already knew, whatever. Are they a good hockey player? Yay. That's, for me, that's what I have some hope for. I don't necessarily think I've seen too much, especially in the last few weeks. There's been just some awful stuff online, and even by press, to be honest, and in the hockey world. And I don't know that that's an atmosphere that people are going to feel safe coming out in.
Well, they're not, and that's why we don't have any. I mean, to this point, I'm the only professional player in North America to ever come out, and that's problematic in itself. And on the men's side of the sport, I should clarify, on the men's side.
Yeah, that is kind of, I've been fascinated by that, because the women's side seems to have a completely, I mean, there are issues there too, but it's a completely, nobody blinks.
Yeah, no, it's much more queer inclusive than the men's side.
And I know as an adult who didn't come out publicly until much later because it wasn't safe, and did get some flack when I did, work-wise. I mean, I'm protected, there's a union, it's California, blah, blah, blah. Everyone's open-minded, right? No. But I know, I can see where it would be, this is why I'm always very careful to tell kids people should come out if they're ready and if they have the support, and if not, it's okay not to. So I can understand people not coming out right now. I also hope, like I said, that those youth who then grow up and come maybe into the major leagues, that's my hope, that they'll just be already out anyway, and everyone's going to be able to, it won't be, there's nothing that they can get flack about because they're already there.
Yeah. And Wren?
Yeah, I think going off of that, generationally, there's going to be change. Currently, there are already players that I look up to that are not part of the queer community, but are allies, that just have a blanket statement of, if you're here, I will support you, no matter who you are, which I really appreciate. I think as someone who came out at an earlier age than some, someone would find the way that I came out later than some, but as someone who came out in their teens, and now works with queer teenagers, queer youth in general, I find that having programs that are inclusive, especially in sports, promote chosen family. A team means a chosen family. As someone who works with at-risk youth, they might not have family that support them. And having a team means that you automatically have people that have your back, no matter what.
I love that.
And providing opportunities for youth to be a part of that, no matter their background, no matter where they're coming from, is super important. So opportunities in hockey, like providing program sponsored, like scholarships, or organizers to come into the community and be like, hey, we're here, we recognize that you want to be included and we're willing to work on it, as opposed to you're obviously included, because that's not, how would we know? You know, they have to actually put in the effort to be like, hey, we want to include you in this. Yes. How do we best support you? Because that's action, right? Not just words.
And that's what we need. And you know, wow, you're both really inspiring. And this has been my, I'll say one of my, because I shouldn't say my favorite, but one of my favorite interviews that we've done so far. Like, we've gone over time and I had to message to tell the next one that we're running behind. No, but it's brilliant. I've enjoyed speaking to you both. I love it so much. And keep doing it and keep being there, because your visibility matters, and it's changing the sport. So thank you both.